Good evening, America. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you, as always, from Washington, D.C. and the WiredToFishCoffee.com studios. You know this Wired to Fish Coffee is the official coffee of Just the News, and you can go right now to Wired2Fishcoffee.com and get a fantastic 10% discount on all of their great blends of coffee, as well as their great mugs. Go check out the Just the News tumbler, as well as a special offer right now. You can get an autographed copy of my book, plus some great coffee. Check it out. Use the promo code JustNews at checkout, 10% off. All right, we're learning a lot about the man at the center, one of the most important deportation cases in a long time. His name is Kilmar Abrigo Garcia. And if you read most of the legacy media, you swear this guy was a wonderful man from Maryland, father, wife, husband, and peaceful, loving guy who, by the way, just was wrongfully deported. I guess the word we see, mistakenly or wrongfully deported. Well, there's another side. Just a little while ago, the Homeland Security Department released records showing that the very woman who stands by his side now in 2021 filed a restraining order alleging he had domestically abused her in a violent episode back in May of 2021. In addition, we got a lot of news today from the podium at the White House from Carolyn Leavitt, the press secretary. I want to play that, and then we're going to tell you about a breaking news story we have. But first, take a listen to what Carolyn Leavitt had to say.
The Democrats and the media in this room have continually and wrongly labeled Kilmar Abrigo Garcia as a Maryland father. There is no Maryland father. Let me reiterate. Kilmar Abrigo Garcia is an illegal alien, MS-13 gang member and foreign terrorist who was deported back to his home country. And when Kilmar Abrigo Garcia was originally arrested, he was wearing a sweatshirt with rolls of money covering the ears, mouth, and eyes of presidents on various currency denominations. This is a known MS-13 gang symbol of hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil.
All right, we're going to put on the Just the News site all the documents that she just referred to. The Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem have released those documents. They'll be up in a little bit. I want to tell you about something because you're a RAV fan. We're going to give this news to you early. It's going to break on Just the News later tonight. Back in 2022, the Biden administration, Joe Biden's administration, flagged the same gentleman for suspicion of human trafficking. They listed him as a suspect alien, and they said that he was suspected of possible human trafficking or human smuggling because he was found in a car full of people coming from Texas, driving without a lawful license, speeding, driving erratically. We're going to get you that information in great detail. The Homeland Security, Intelligence, and Investigations units flagged this man under the Biden administration. We're going to have that later tonight, right around 9 or 10 o'clock. So go back to justthenews.com there. Let me turn to one other story we broke last night, right after our show, Amanda. I felt kind of bad. We missed it before, but you remember Letitia James. She's the woman that aggressively went after President Trump, secured that $434 million judgment against him, and once said, anyone who cheats on their mortgage cheats every day, America. That's what she said. She actually put it on Twitter. Well, last night, the Federal Housing Finance Administration referred that same Letitia James to the Justice Department and the FBI for possible criminal prosecution for, you know it, cheating on her mortgages, making false statements to get a better interest rate in one and possibly two cases. We have more of that breaking right now over at Just News. You can check that out. It's a great time to bring in my amazing co-host Amanda Head. Boy, hypocrisy is not in shortage in America these days.
Rules for thee, not for me, especially if you were a New York Attorney.
How many times have we heard that?
All right, I have a little bit more on Kilmar Abrigo Garcia. And as you know, Maryland Senator and Democrat Chris Van Hollen traveled down to El Salvador today to show solidarity with Abrigo Garcia. He has become somehow a rallying cry for the left who oppose the immigration policies of Donald Trump. And despite Attorney General Pam Bondi explaining that he was in the country illegally and has alleged ties to MS-13 and what John just reported on, the Democrats are making Abrigo Garcia a symbol of what they stand for. Not Laken Riley, not Rachel Morin, but a man who was here in this country illegally and possibly committed some pretty heinous crimes. So let that sink in for a second. Now, AG Bondi has also asserted that Abrego Garcia will not be coming back to the country, even though the Trump administration would abide by the Supreme Court's order to facilitate his return by sending a plane to El Salvador to pick him up if he was released from the Salvadorian government's custody. Well, Senator Van Hollen went to speak to the authorities in El Salvador about getting Abrego Garcia out, and here is what was in that country earlier today, speaking all about it.
I'm asking President Bukele, under his authority as president of El Salvador, to do the right thing and allow Mr. Abrego Garcia to walk out of a prison, a man who's charged with no crime, convicted of no crime, and who was illegally abducted from the United States.
The former President Joe Biden might want to release some of that information to his fellow Democrats, but let's see if that's a winning message with the American people. I don't know if Democrats fighting hard for an illegal alien much more visibly than they have for American hostages taken by Hamas, for example. I don't know if that's going to work very well for them. John, I continue to hear that he is a Maryland father. He's not a Maryland father. He's not a Maryland anything. He is an El Salvadorian.
Yeah. So I have right now in my hands a Justice Department document, just came out 30 seconds ago. Abrego Garcia claimed to have walked through the desert for many days, entering illegally into the United States near McAllen, Texas, on or about March 25th, 2012. That was during Barack Obama. When he was encountered, this is what he told his agents. He admitted he was illegally in the United States. And oh, by the way, in this document, it also says that he was amenable to leaving the country, that he understood that he was illegally there and should leave the country. A little bit different story than you've been getting from his lawyers, his wife, and the Democratic media. All right. Somebody who always gives us the truth, particularly on the border, one of the most important oversight chairmen in right now in America. He's the guy that helped discover all those tens of thousands of unaccompanied migrant children that the government lost track of. He's from the great state of Wisconsin. You know him well, Congressman Glenn Grothman. Sir, good to have you on the show.
Glad to be on the show. Another shocking example of the Democratic Party looking to defend anybody who came in this country illegally, no matter how bad they are. And let's not forget, all people who came in this country illegally ought to be deported. It's an insult to the over 800,000 people who are sworn in as new citizens every year in this country to allow anybody in here who did not do things appropriately.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, you have done so much to call attention to that. So I just want to ask a little bit, when you see the record of this man, the allegation that he had the MS-13 ties, he admits from the document I just read from a few seconds ago that he was illegally in the country and entered illegally. He's flagged after a traffic stop in Tennessee for suspicion of human smuggling. In 2025, we finally get the guy out of the country, and the courts want to bring him back as though he's some hero. How do we reconcile our courts with the body of evidence that's before the courts?
Well, I think it's something with regard to another segment you have coming up. Our Bar Association, which fills our courts, is filling our courts with people who are just doing whatever the left-wing extremists want to destroy this country. I mean, that's what it comes down to. How could you defend this guy? And it's an embarrassment that anybody would wind up being a judge and still defend him and still say he has to be in this country, other than somebody who uses their position to do whatever they can to destroy America. Again, this guy has no business in America because he came here legally, even if he was a Boy Scout otherwise. But when you have a guy who's suspected of perhaps human trafficking, a guy who was domestic abusing his wife, I mean, come on here. You know, I mean, it just shows that there is nobody who Joe Biden and right now the Democrat Party would not try to let in this country.
Sir, there have been some pretty big ideas floating around the House with regards to judicial reform for inferior courts. And I know Congressman Darrell Issa and Andy Biggs, both of them had ideas, as well as Senator Chuck Grassley on the Senate side of things. Have any of those measures moved any?
Not yet, but I anticipate they will move, and I would certainly hope we pass them at least out of the House of Representatives. I mean, there are so many district judges right now. The idea that you can look all around the country, find any one of these judges to come down with an order that affects the entire country is absurd. I mean, it just invites judge shopping and invites looking around for the most radical judge on any given issue, and he will weigh in and eventually ruin the country. And what they do is they undermine respect for the law. I think there was a time where kind of a judge meant somebody you're supposed to look up to a little bit, respect. And now, a judge in the United States is no different than a judge in some banana republic in some third world country who just does the bidding of the party in charge. And in this case, even though hypothetically the Republicans are in charge, the judiciary seems disproportionately run by a bunch of left-wing kooks who are trying to destroy the country. And like I said, this would be embarrassing behavior if it happened in some poor Latin American country, poor African country. I mean, it's just absurd.
Yeah, it's amazing. The greatest country in the world, and we're starting to look like something less than that. So I want to turn to another issue. I know hypocrisy reigns supreme in Washington all the time, but Letitia James made a big point of going after Donald Trump on allegations of fraud, secured one of the largest fraud verdicts against an individual in history, and said that anyone who cheats on their mortgages are essentially cheating the American people. And last night, the Federal Housing Finance Administration referred her to the Justice Department, saying she cheated on her own mortgage records, that she falsified bank documents and property records to acquire government-backed assistance and loans and more favorable loan terms. That's a direct quote from the letter. Your thoughts on what Letitia James means to the American public when now she may have her own scandal?
Well, this is another example of why the American public is losing faith in our judiciary. Good grief. Donald Trump was elected and the Democrats are running around saying 34 felonies, 34 felonies. The average person in this country knows it's a bunch of hokum, and you can be declared a felon by a judge in this country, and it's absolutely meaningless. This further pushes us down the path. We'll see, Letitia James has no business even keeping her bar license. And to this day, New York is the fourth most populated state in the country. Are they going to sit there and turn a license for the New York bar into a joke by continuing to allow her? I mean, she shouldn't be a judge. She shouldn't even be a lawyer of any nature, given her behavior.
Sir, Republicans have a fight ahead, frankly, within themselves, because you've got a lot of fiscal conservatives on the Republican side who say we really want to cut the spending, we really want to save the American people money. And then there are some Republicans who I think may have backed off of it a little bit, and maybe they're just uncomfortable with the spending levels that, lofty goals that a lot of folks have proposed. What's that going to look like in the next few months?
Well, I think you have to stop and think. When I run for public office, and I check off that I want to run as Republican, it should mean I want the government to play less of a role in the life of the average American, which means less spending. And to me, it also matters what type of spending we have. There's some spending that's more damaging than others, although we are so out of whack. By the way, so your listeners know, 26% of our federal budget is borrowed. Think about that hole we have us in, okay? 26% of every Social Security check, 26% of every new tank for the military, 26% of every new highway is borrowed money. Okay. So, I mean, if you checked off Republican, baby, you better be ready to dig in and get rid of this fraud and abuse, not to mention get rid of anything that is not prescribed by the U.S. Constitution, I would say. So we'll see what the Republicans are made up of now. My personal favorite is our welfare system, which is encouraging sloth, even more discouraging people from getting married. We'll see whether that survives this cut, but I think there obviously should be big changes there, but all the way across the board. Waste in the military. I noticed our wonderful new Secretary of Defense pointed out we had way too many aircraft carriers the other day. We'll see whether Congress has the ability to act on what he clearly wants to have happen there. I'm sure he doesn't want to get rid of them all, but maybe one or two less. But we'll see if Congress can finally say no. Because as a congressman, as a state legislator for that matter, all I do when I'm in Washington is attend meetings of people with their hand out saying, give me more stuff. Well, we'll see if the Republicans can act like Republicans within the next 2 months.
Yeah, there's nothing like hearing really from the people who own this country, the American people. Mm-hmm. Congressman, as always, it's a great honor. All the work you're doing on Capitol Hill is so important to the American public. Thanks for joining us today and giving us an update.
Okay, and we want that New York Bar Association to kick it into gear. Get rid of the embarrassments.
It's
Get
a
rid of
deal.
the embarrassments in their ranks.
I love it.
So good to have you on, sir. Thank you so much. All right, folks, a little while ago, Amanda was able to sit down with Congressman Tim Burchett shortly before the show. So we're going to have that next after this commercial break. Hey, folks, if you're a homeowner, you need to listen to this. When's the last time you checked on your home title? I know the answer. That's the legal proof, of course, that you own your house. If you're like me, the answer is never. The problem is, in today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, your home title has been transferred out of your name. That's not a good situation. Then they take out loans using your equity or even sell your property, and you're not even going to know about it until you get a collection or foreclosure notice. That's why you need to stop what you're doing and find out today if you're already a victim. Use the promo code JTN at HometitleLock.com to make sure your title is still in your name. You also get a free title history report plus a free 14-day trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud should happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. Go to HometitleLock.com right now and use the promo code JTN. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code JTN.
Welcome back, everybody. Right before the show tonight, I was able to sit down with Congressman Tim Burchett. We talked about a whole range of things, including Letitia James, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and so much more. Take a look. Joining us now, representing the beautiful and great state of Tennessee, the volunteer state, Congressman Tim Burchett. Congressman, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, ma'am. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise, and we were just ruminating over the idea that for some elected officials, I don't know if the temptation is too great. There used to be an award given out for the world's stupidest criminal. I don't know if these folks are stupid or if it's just audacity. They think they won't get caught. But at any rate, Letitia James being referred for possible mortgage fraud charges. She was trying to prosecute President Trump for defrauding lenders, and now it looks like she's going to be looked into for the same.
Yeah, I think they call that the Darwin Awards. These folks get into these things and they think they're smarter than the rest of us. They just get arrogant. I'd say this is the tip of the iceberg from folks like this when they think they can get up and point the finger at everybody and then they don't look at themselves. And it's a recipe for disaster. They always get caught. They always do. I was telling you, I was in the legislature with guys like that, and every dadgum time, they just got too cocky and arrogant. And I remember one guy, they had him on film, FBI footage, and they counted out thousands of dollars to him, the FBI did. And, he was in a sting and he was counting out the $500 and he'd put 500 in one pocket and he counted another 500, put it in another pocket. And the lady sitting beside me, a fellow senator, said, "God, Tim, it looks like it's almost like he's done that before." I was like, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I try to be neutral on these things and say, well, it probably happens on the other side too. But frankly, Congressman, I can't really cite an instance where it was a Republican or a conservative prosecutor going after a political foe, and then as it turns out, they did or alleged to have done the exact same thing.
Yeah, to me, it's the irony is so rich in this thing. It almost cuts you can taste it. It's just unbelievable that the audacity of these folks is just unbelievable, and their hatred of Trump just overshadows everything. I mean, she could have rode off into the sunset as just done a crappy job up there and not gone after Trump, but she went out with a vengeance. As you can see there, she's speaking against President Trump and showing her, she's not, it's unbelievable to me and that they're allowed to do this. And she would have probably been reelected, and she probably still will if they don't convict her.
Right. And maybe if they do. I mean, that might be a badge she wears.
We had a Tennessean one time that was convicted of a felony and was elected from jail.
Well, it happens. It's happened in presidential elections. So Stranger things have happened. I want to ask you about Judge Boasberg, this activist judge that seems to be on the opposite side of President Trump in practically every issue before his bench, which seems to be a lot. That seems to happen more often than it should, statistically speaking, on the judicial wheel. But anyway, he says that there is probable cause to hold Trump officials in criminal contempt over the deportations. Now, that criminal contempt would have to come by the DOJ. How is that going to work?
I don't think it is. They'll figure out some angle. They shop around to get these liberal extremist judges, and it really matters who you elect as president. I believe he's an Obama appointee, and regardless, we've got to quit playing ball with these folks. You know, Republicans, we get in there and we want to be nice, and we'll let a moderate slide, and we can't do that anymore. We cannot do that anymore. The heart and soul of this country is at stake, and this is another instance of this. This is just. They interpret the law as they see fit, and no one, and the arrogance. I always say these guys, you know, the difference between them and God knows he's not a federal judge.
Isn't that the truth? I love that. I'm going to have to borrow that. All right, I want to flip to the other house, the Senate. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen made a whole hullabaloo about how he was going to go down to El Salvador and he was going to jailbreak Abrego Garcia. He didn't, of course, use those terms, but that was the sentiment and what I imagine, was trying to fundraise off of, but it certainly went viral on Twitter. As it turns out, he apparently got rejected because they said this is something that you need to take up with the Trump administration. So he was there for, as we like to say, a hot second, and then he was returned back home. Was it all just a publicity stunt? Does this seem like something one of your Democrat colleagues in the House would have done?
100%. I'm sure they're all just scratching their head thinking, dang, I should have done that.
I wish I'd done that, yeah.
Yeah, but to think that they're raising all this Hades about someone who is in our country illegally, and you didn't see them raise one peep about these kids getting murdered, raped, trafficked, just all these other things, and the thousands and thousands of children that have disappeared. And where was the outrage there? There never was any. I can remember a wonderful family in my area, the Corcorans. The daddy's he's a buddy of mine. He was a fireman, and their little boy was killed by a drunk illegal, and they couldn't get a meeting with Pelosi. They couldn't get a meeting with anybody, Schumer or the president or anybody. And Donald Trump would have embraced those people, yeah. and he has. And this is just the difference in leadership, and just as I've said many times, this is not my grandparents' Democrat Party. It's been overtaken by the Marxists, and these folks are just all they're trying to do is trying to hang on to that very, very small minority of folks that believe this type of activity is okay. And they're anarchists, really. I think they want to deep down, they hate this country and they want to destroy it. And it's the least common denominator. You know, they keep saying we're going to defund Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security. I've been in all those meetings. No one has ever even brought that up. It is so ridiculous. And yet the lamestream media or the legacy media or whatever you want to call it, they keep promoting that. And it's just wrong, and it's a lie. But that's all they're resorting to, and frankly, it's pretty effective because it's got a lot of people scared. I get a lot of letters from educated people and calls saying you're not going to take away that. I said, heck no. Yeah. So yeah, we got some real problems.
And it's really awful that they're doing that and causing, especially America's seniors, on Social Security to be fearful about that. And since you brought that up, and since you also brought up Democrats and grandparents, speaking of grandparents who are Democrats talking about Social Security, Joe Biden last night in Chicago was speaking on this very issue, parroting the same talking point of the Democrat Party that you were just talking about with respect to Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. But he also, you would think that with a few months off, not really having a lot of public appearances, not giving any speeches, not having to go to debates or answer questions from the media, that he would be refreshed. But last night, he almost kind of seemed like, remember that first debate with Donald Trump, the one that basically got him booted out? He kind of seemed like that.
Yeah, I saw some of the things he said, and it's just, he was awful. And you just got to wonder who was running our dadgum country the last 4 years and why. I was banned from some of the other liberal TV stations because I had the audacity to question his his mental capacity, his cognitive skills, I believe was the word I used, words. And then, it's just, I suspect somebody's going to write a book and they're all going to sit up and say, oh, yeah, we warned you. And they didn't warn us. They're lying. It reminds me of the issue of Andy Griffith one time where Hollywood was coming to town to make, to show Mayberry as it was. And they all changed. And Barney wore this crazy outfit and the mayor dressed up in this fancy suit. And they were going to cut down this tree downtown. And then the Hollywood people said, we're not doing it. We're out. We're out. And then Andy and the mayor were talking. And the mayor said, we tried to warn them, Andy. We tried to warn them.
Yep.
And they didn't.
That actually reminds me of real Hollywood every year when the Oscars come to town and they try to clean it up and make it look like something it's not. Before I let you go, sir, I want to go back to something that we talked about at the top, and that was Republicans having a spine and remaining conservative, especially fiscally, making sure these spending cuts are in there for the next time around, making permanent President Trump's tax cuts. How united is the Republican caucus when it comes to those more fiscally conservative promises that people have made?
Well, I'm united in it. I think that's all I can speak for. And yeah, we got some colleagues that are frankly gutless and they're not going to stick with it. We do not need to give government any more money. In Tennessee, if you want more money, if the government needs more money, they cut more taxes because guess what? It causes more growth. We can't fit another northerner in our state. I used to rent U-Hauls and you never could get the big trucks. Now that's all they've got because guess what? Everybody's moving here.
Yep.
That gum, you can't shake a stick without somebody has a funny accent. I'm the only person in America that doesn't speak with an accent, I don't think anymore.
Absolutely.
But, and they're so conservative. The funny thing is about the folks that move here is that they'll tell you, they'll say, we're here. We want to keep it the way it is, and it's kind of a misnomer. They think everybody's wanting to change it. It's the locals that tend to bend a little bit on the change, and the people that move here from New York have said, "Man, we've seen how bad it gets. That's why we're here. Do not change it."
Yep, let me tell you. Case in point, we've got some friends in LA who they and their 1, 2, 3 children are moving to Tennessee. So everybody sees greener pastures literally in Tennessee.
Yes, ma'am. And it's a low tax state, and we love it. Tell them, come on. We'll tell them to holler at me. I'll hook them up with a realtor if they need one.
Perfect. Well, it's my birth state, so it holds a very, very special place in my heart. Congressman Tim Burchett from Tennessee, thank you so much for being here tonight, sir.
Ma'am, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
And coming up, we're going to recap the battle between the Trump administration and Harvard. Should they be receiving federal funds? That's next.
Welcome back, America. A little breaking news. The island of Puerto Rico in a complete total blackout again just a few days before the Easter weekend, a very prominent event on that island, very Catholic island. We have the latest details of that at justthenews.com. Go check it out and we'll keep you up to date throughout the night. It's an island that's had a lot of electrical problems and a troubled utility for many years, but a total darkness there tonight at the start of the evening. All right, we're going to turn to another subject where it has a lot of darkness, but in a different light. The clear fight against anti-Semitism, where, by the way, there's some victories being scored. Joining us now, the Executive Vice President of the Coalition for Jewish Values, Rabbi Yaakov Menken. Rabbi, great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you. Thanks so much.
All right, I want to start with the news in front of us. Harvard has decided that it's okay with where it is on anti-Semitism, and it wants to fight the Trump administration. Your thoughts on where Harvard's come from, where they're going, and what this fight might do to the effort to eradicate anti-Semitism in America?
Well, it's obvious that the Harvard administration has decided to protect the anti-Semites and anti-Semitism rather than, quote unquote, buckle to completely reasonable demands that they demonstrate the place is suitable for Jewish students. Harvard has seen really notable, horrific incidents. I mean, as you probably recall, days after October 7th, a whole series of 30 left-wing organizations at Harvard gathered together to blame Israel, blame the Jews for being slaughtered, which is something straight out of the Nazi era. And the idea that that campus should be conducive to Jewish life when they are gathering around visibly Orthodox students just to harass them for being Jews is unconscionable. And the fact that the university would expect funding from the Trump administration, while it remains that hostile to Jewish students, is similarly unconscionable. So that's unfortunately where we are.
Yeah, and it absolutely goes beyond the Second Amendment and freedom of speech, and that fact remains elusive to Harvard. I want to ask you about generational anti-Semitism, because it certainly seems like it has ramped up with this latest generation. Why do you think that is? Why has it been allowed to percolate so much?
10 years ago, a Jewish professor said to me, he said that he believes that the reason why you did not have this sort of hostility towards Israel, look at the 1970s when anti-Semitism, when the so-called occupation was brand new, or in the 1980s when I was a student at Princeton and there was zero hostility against a Jewish student who went to Israel. I became religious in Israel, and wearing a yarmulke, as a result of my time in Israel, I became the president of the largest student organization on campus. And even before October 23, I was saying, I don't think this would be happening anymore, sadly. Where we are with Jewish students is, this professor told me, he said in the 1970s, when the occupation was new, the reason why they didn't talk like this was pretty simple. You still had living professors on campus able to tell these students, you know what? You sound awfully like German university students in the 1930s. And that was enough to chill them. Today, the kids marching campus, it's absolutely, I have not found anywhere in American history the idea that shouting down a speaker, that an organized effort to prevent speakers from speaking and silencing them, I've never found that in America, because we're all about free speech. And you only care about free speech if you care about your adversary's right to speak also. So this idea, I found no model for it in American history. And the only model I can find for it in European history is the Hitler Youth. This is straight out of totalitarian dictatorships. And once again, Hitler's Nazi minions. That's where we are, very sadly, today.
Heartbreaking. So I want to talk a little bit about the machinery that fuels and funds this anti-Semitism. A lot of it is done under the auspices of tax exemption, U.S. tax exemption, nonprofit status in America. Some of it's universities. President Trump suggested today maybe he'll go after Harvard's tax exempt status, but there are NGOs all across the planet that have been part of, some under the UN, some under liberal causes. Is it time to revisit whether anti-Semitism should be a standard for determining whether a nonprofit gets a tax exemption in the United States?
Well, someone is going to immediately say, why single out the Jews for special treatment when what's clear is they're being faced with special animosity. But the fact of the matter is that the IRS has always had the authority to strip an organization of its tax exemption if it endorses hate. It's simply time to treat hate seriously on campus. Chris Rufo came out with an article in which he compared what's going on campuses to a chapter of the KKK opening up. And would the university accept that? And obviously the university would not. And, even the Jewish people are saying, but how can you compare the KKK to what's going on campus? I was wait a minute. Okay, you're right. It's not quite the same, because the KKK, unlike students on campus, does not openly endorse a genocidal terror organization out to slaughter all the blacks in the world. We only allow students on campus to march in support of death of all the Jews in the world.
Sir, I want to ask you about a very famous Harvard alumni who spoke out in support of Harvard, former President Barack Obama. Obviously, DEI is another part of Harvard's issues, but the anti-Semitism is really, really a major issue that we're facing. How do you surpass, or how do you overcome a former president speaking out in support of this university? I mean, even just messaging-wise, how do you market against that?
Well, it's sadly typical. Thank goodness he is no longer in power during this particularly fraught era. It is so dangerous and so irrational. I mean, what they're saying is that the university has the right to do it however they want to do it, but they should still get federal funding. I'm sorry, the federal government has the right to control its purse strings. And if you're not following the agreements you made with the federal government, conditions like Title VI and applying Title VI to Jewish students, if you're allowing discrimination against Jews on campus, there's again been people who say, wait a minute, these are Jewish scientists and Jewish science labs that are losing their funding because of the humanities departments. And to which my response is, look, I'm very sorry. But if Jewish students are unwilling to come to your campus, if they're not safe on your campus, the idea that you should get money from the federal government for your research is unconscionable.
Yeah. So I want to ask just one more question. I've had a chance over the last few months to talk to some of the members of the Holocaust Museum, and they all really seem to believe strongly that there's a direct connection between the rise of anti-Semitism and the rise of philosophies like DEI and CRT that divide the world into oppressors and the oppressed. Are the two intertwined, and is there a way to break both at the same time?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad that you told me that people at the Holocaust Museum recognize the tie between all of this DEI nonsense. I mean, sadly, part of it is the Jews disproved the entire DEI narrative that you can't have equity without giving special treatment to historically oppressed minority groups, because the Jews certainly have a history of being an oppressed minority group. And that includes in America. There were times when people wouldn't work on Saturday, immediately got fired from their jobs. And yet, somehow, we're here. We fought back against that. People opened their own law firms to compete with the white shoe law firms. And now today, it's normal, although sadly, we're seeing some discrimination now. It's becoming less normal again to have Jews in those Tony law firms and everywhere else. And of course, in the medical fields and all sorts of charitable activities. But, the bottom line is that DEI is about this idea that you can't come back from a bad situation unless you get handouts from the government. And it's all the government's fault, and the government's got to fix it. And there's this systemic racism, whether or not you can identify it. It's just a feeling in the air. Of course, all of that turns against Jews. And in fact, there's been a number of studies done now that show the DEI officials are portraying Israel in a very negative light, even compared to countries like China, where the totalitarian government is A, persecuting Muslims, and B, persecuting its own people.
Rabbi, you are such a voice of moral clarity in an era where we need it loud and clear. It is a great honor to have you on the show today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Look forward to being back with you again.
Thank you, sir. God bless you. All right. Coming up, with the markets fluctuating, how can you protect yourself? We'll talk about that one next, right after these messages.
Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. We have seen a lot of financial ups and downs in the last few weeks, but what you haven't probably heard much about is U.S. Treasuries and a possible risk emerging with them. Joining us now to explain is the CEO of American Alternative Assets, Shannon Davis. Shannon, thanks so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Happy to have you. Yeah. And, I think for a lot of Americans, you hear risk and treasuries in the same sentence, and that doesn't necessarily compute because historically it's been a very, very safe and secure investment. What's going on?
Yeah, it's definitely tough to resonate in their minds. We're all so adverse to change as it is, but need to pay attention to it. Crucial developments in this sector, the financial market. No one is buying our treasuries, and China's dumping them back and buying their own treasuries within their own state. And when you talk about our backbone being something that's not being able to be sold right now, extreme leverage out there right now that's being held 10 to 1. You talk about 1 trillion in U.S. treasuries, which represents 11% of the entire market. They can't move. No one wants to buy them, and there's margin calls that are forcing the funds to be liquidated. The Treasury and the Federal Reserve, they're in a bind right now. There's no doubt about it. And there's hedge funds that are hemorrhaging right now, that are surging the inflation problem that we've been dealing with for quite some time. So when you look at the Treasury market, It's a pillar of our global financial system, and it could be destabilized truly. So there's a lot to pay attention to in that market, and U.S. banks are being pressured right now to absorb this unwanted debt, and that's going to be dramatically increasing their risk exposure. And under the current laws of our banking system, FDIC is having some challenges right now with funding themselves. So, a lot of things that these Americans really need to start paying attention to when it comes to our government that is one step away from, again, the bail-ins that we've seen throughout our history. Yes, it can involve your deposits. If you're thinking bail-ins, I know we were used to the word bailouts, but they're now bail-ins, and they could affect Americans' deposits. It's a deeper and broader shift than most even understand. So, no foreign confidence in our U.S. Treasury. The dollar global dominance is under threat, and it has been for some time now. And everyday savers will bear the cost of this crisis again.
Yeah. So many blinking red lights feel similar to 2008. And it's interesting to watch what the rest of the world is seeing. About a year ago, I think it became obvious that there was a lot of leveraging going on in the U.S. stock market. A lot of central banks going to gold. If central banks are going to gold, obviously it seems to suggest we wise people, individuals should go to it. But describe why central banks started moving to gold in the last couple of years.
It's safe. It's because the Treasury market is no longer a safe haven. It's got no counterparty risk. It's something that's held value, and they're starting to trade now in gold and silver and bullion. China's freed up billions of dollars through their insurance companies. That's how they're buying more gold.
Right.
Their citizens are on a buying frenzy. It is now just a much different asset class than it used to be in the 80s and the 90s. I mean, this is real money. J.P. Morgan said it himself back in the late 30s that gold is real money. Everything else is just credit and debt.
That's right.
And so people are starting to realize that our monetary system is changing once again. And this is a tier one asset. It's real money, and it's liquid across this entire world. And central banks are noticing that rates are raising. They are seeing that this is the only safe asset, and it has been for 5,000 years. It's nothing new.
Yep. I love the website. John Likes Gold.
I know. I got to thank you
fantastic.
for creating my own website. I love it.
John
loves like gold.
Shannon, what are people?
I love it.
What are people going to find when they go to johnlikesgold.com?
Just an opportunity to get educated. That's really where it starts. It's about strategy. John, you said something that was spot on. These are things we haven't seen since 2008. So in 2008, 2009, we had some very big corrections. People lost in their portfolios. If you had hedged your portfolio with physical gold and silver, if you were truly diversified outside of the stock market, you did not lose. Gold and silver did very well. And so it just educates you on the history of gold, on the process of owning gold and silver. The good news is it's not too late. I know people think, gold is too high, but that's exactly the opposite. They thought that when it was $2,500 an ounce, they thought it was $2,000 an ounce, it was too high. $1,500 an ounce, they thought it was too high. They'll get an opportunity to educate themselves with one of our free wealth protection guides that we can provide them, so they can have a better understanding of how it works, what type of costs are involved, what the process looks like, because you have to have a strategy in place. You have to be willing to change what you're typically used to doing in these equities markets. And that's what they're going to be able to find out on our website and our partnership with John on gold and silver. They're going to learn a lot.
I love
It's
it.
all about
Appreciate
learning.
that partnership.
I love it. Yeah,
That's
and
really
really, really good deal. Go to johnlikesgold.com or call 855-GOLD-340 to get your guide now. That's 855-465-3340. johnlikesgold.com. I love it. All right, everybody. CEO of American Alternative Assets, Shannon Davis, thanks so much for joining us tonight and educating us on all of this. And if you want to learn more about American Alternative Assets, go to johnlikesgold.com or call 855-GOLD-340 to get your guide now. Everybody, we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to our final segment of the night. I want to end where we started with your scoop from those documents, the information that shows us that Abrego Garcia, that he was already flagged by the Biden administration, not just for being in the country illegally as he was under Barack Obama, but also for some other pretty heinous crimes.
And he admitted that he was in the country illegally. It's hard to, if you admit you're in the country illegal, that you entered across the border that way, it's pretty hard to make the case.
It's a prosecutor's dream.
Yeah, it's a confession, and it's sitting in the documents. I think the other part is this human smuggling thing. We'll get you more details tonight, but you're going to see this stop in Tennessee, and the trooper just realizes something untoward's here. That gets alerted to the Homeland Security Investigations Unit, and then there's a double flag that occurs. And that occurs under Joe Biden, where they weren't flagging a lot of illegal aliens in the country. So if he was concerning to the Joe Biden administration, I don't know what the Democrats are going to be able to say about that, but we'll get that story up later this evening. So keep an eye on that. Amanda, in a few seconds, I think Amanda, Real America's Voice, at some point soon, will be going to the Easter celebration at the White House. President Trump has really used this particular Easter to celebrate faith and to use the extraordinary pulpit he has at the White House to celebrate faith and to be a little bit more expressive about his own feelings about faith. I keep thinking how much that's driven by maybe what he experienced last summer with those assassination attempts, but a very powerful event tonight at the White House. I was talking to people going to, and they were really excited.
Yeah. Nothing like getting shot in the head to bring things into perspective. I think you're right. I think that there is a soberness to President Trump this time around. Of course, the Democrats would have you believe that he is a maniac and a tyrant and all of those hyperbolic words that they like to use. But the reality is that he's just delivering on promises that he made on the campaign trail. And when it comes to this Easter week, I mean, he said at the outset that this was going to be a little bit of a slower week. And tonight, as John said, we're going to air that prayer dinner. That prayer event where I imagine President Trump and the First Lady will be lighting candles and just, observing the somberness of what this week represents leading up to Friday. And then, of course, the resurrection on Sunday.
Yeah, 3 nails in a cross equals 4 given. And I always kept that equation close to my heart when I was growing up. Related to that, when you take the Josh Shapiro episode this week and the 2 trap assassination attempts we talked about, the Paul Pelosi incident, in all of those circumstances, there was law enforcement around to protect them. I think America suddenly has a problem protecting its VIPs. And I talked to Bernie Carrick earlier today in the podcast, and he said, listen, DEI got into the cop shops too, and we're just getting people who aren't ready for the job of protecting a president, a House Speaker, or her family, a governor. That is a pretty remarkable statement from one of the great men in blue. It's something we're going to keep an eye on. I think we'll have a good story on it tomorrow.
Yeah, DEI is an infection on any agency that it takes up residency at, and it's unfortunate.
5-letter word for you, Honda. Something's going on with Honda.
Something, indeed. But I want to cut to something that I wrote on today that somebody gave me a little tip on. The New York Times actually admitting that they were wrong. Yeah. It was the 30th paragraph, and it was 1,444th, 5th, and 6th words talking about how Russia collusion hoax had never been substantiated.
Yeah, how about that? In a story that wasn't even related to Russia collusion. No. It was about something else, a historian or something. Yeah, listen, that's how the New York Times gets rights with his reader. He tries to hide it and slide it in. Backdoor apology or backdoor admission to wrongdoing. The American people came to that assessment a lot quicker than the New York Times, sadly.
Yeah, and you look at poll after poll after poll when it comes to mainstream media credibility and trust, and it is so low at this point, and it makes you wonder how much longer places like that will survive.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
And you actually spoke to an author today who was talking about
Ashley Rensberg.
That's
We're
right.
going to get him
right.
on the TV show. He is so
yeah,
good.
The
so
great,
good.
the Gray Lady Winked.
He's a Gray
right?
Lady Winked. The
yeah.
author of that great book.
Great book.
Yeah.
Great book and great commentary and great quotes that I was able to add to my story. So thanks for that.
Good deal.
All right, everybody. That's all we have for you tonight. Grant Sinchfield is going to be next. And remember, in the next hearing, maybe 15, 20 minutes, President Trump and the First Lady will be participating in that prayer event at the White House. So everybody have a wonderful night. We'll be back here at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening and God bless.